Hey there, Cosmic Warriors, and welcome back to another video. And if you are new here, my name is Hannah. I am a Western Practical Astrologer. Okay, so in today's video, we are going to be talking all about your Uranus in Taurus story. So Uranus has been in the sign of Taurus since 2018, 2019 time, and is due to move into Gemini by July of 2025 for a short period of time. And then by 2026, Uranus will move out of Taurus and into Gemini. So let's talk about it. Now, before we do dive in, however, if you would like to learn more about astrology, then head on over to the Cosmic Check-In podcast, and you can always pick up a copy of my astrology cheat sheets. And if you would like to book a reading with me, then go to hannahselsewhere.com. Thank you so much. So, firstly, let's just go over a few key dates, some key notes. So, see here that Uranus first entered Taurus on the 15th of May 2018 until November. And then there was the retrograde. And by March of 2019, Uranus entered Taurus, and it has been in Taurus essentially since that time. And by July of 2025, Uranus will dip its toe into Gemini for a short window. And we're still going to wrap things up within our Taurus house from the 7th of November 2025 until April of 2026. Okay, so I also want to mention something pretty important here, and it is to do with the duration of Uranus. Uranus spends about 7 to 8 years or so in each sign, and so therefore, Uranus will not be in Taurus again for another 84 years, about that. And it got me thinking about Venus. So Venus is the very ruler of Taurus and has acted as the dispositor of Uranus whilst Uranus has been in Taurus. And so I thought about the 5 petal rose of Venus. So this cycle, this pattern that Venus makes. So it got me thinking about the Venus retrogrades and how those Venus retrogrades over the past 7 to 8 years or so, how those Venus retrogrades are tied in with your Uranus and Taurus story. So we had the Venus retrograde in Libra and Scorpio at the end of 2018. Then we had Venus retrograde in Gemini by 2020, throughout 2020. And by the end of 2021, coming into the new year, we had Venus retrograde in Capricorn. And moving on, we also experienced the 2023 Venus retrograde in Leo throughout the summer. I remember that one quite clearly. And what do we also see? The Venus retrograde in both Aries and Pisces throughout 2025, so March, April time. This is a retrograde that we're currently experiencing, or should I say, I am recording this during the Venus retrograde in Pisces. Of course, you could be watching this video after the retrograde has occurred. So we're going to touch on those retrogrades throughout your horoscopes. Though, before we do get into your sign, let's just talk about some collective themes as Uranus has moved through Taurus. What we have seen, for example, is the discovery of ancient ruins and bodies. For example, in the 1920s, archaeologists discovered a large Maya city in Mexico. We've also noticed the collapse of natural sites and reserves. So we think about wildlife populations shrinking, habitat loss, issues with climate change, ecosystem changes, challenging changes, pollution harming our ecosystems. Plus, agricultural transformations and changes, major shifts. So think about farming, automation farming, on-farm energy production, alternative protein sources. So this bigger push to use artificial things. So we think about lab-grown meat. Plus, questioning the very stability of our choices, right? So a lot of people have been considering what is a necessity versus what is a luxury. How are we spending our money? What are we spending our money on? Who are we giving our money to? And what about the very longevity, the stability, the security tied to our finances and our resources, our belongings? Notice how, of course, the cost of living has soared over recent years. Think about how Jupiter spent some time in Taurus throughout 2023, 2024, and well, things are still rising. Things are still pretty tough out there for many people. We're actually seeing a lot of people pushing back against this stuff, rising up, having their say. Think about how Pluto is now in Aquarius. Of course, Uranus acting as the very dispositor of Pluto in Aquarius. Why is Pluto in Aquarius important? Because this is a transit that is very much about the people. People, society, the collective having a voice. Okay, moving on. Major changes to the electronic music scene, the music industry. For example, festivals and events were cancelled for obvious reasons. The industry's value decreased. But we have also noticed over recent years the resurgence since 2020, how the value is increasing. A shocking amount of people wanting to be influencers. This makes sense, right? So when we consider the amount of people who are now making money online, and Taurus is very much about money, and then the online space is very much Uranus. And the interesting thing I have noticed over recent years is that people who decided to become influencers, decided to make money online, especially post lockdowns, during lockdowns, post lockdowns, a lot of those people are now choosing to go back to a 9 to 5, or they are wanting something different. They actually are turning away from the online space. Instead of depending on the online world, maybe recognizing that the online world is not very stable. But yet, of course, we're going to see this greater push for these things. So to consider how Uranus will move into Gemini and things are going to amp up, technologically speaking. Then again, we could also see the opposite of that, right? With people choosing a different path for themselves. More on that in the Uranus and Gemini story video. Clout chasing madness, though. A lot of people having their time off, their moment of fame, basically. Wanting to be seen, wanting to be popular. All right, so moving on. The rise and crash of cryptocurrencies. Central bank digital currency being pushed, digital money being used. People aren't using coins or notes like they used to. But then again, there are people who are even deciding to get gold. They are choosing to go a different way. Plus, increased products, digital products, particularly. Consider this educational system or this educational way that people are using the online world. Moreover, the increase in online shopping, think about Amazon, food delivery services, and disruptions security disruptions, which are shocking, which are intense. A lot of people feel destabilized, right? A lot of people feel like, what's the point? It's hard for people even to get a house, get a mortgage. Security challenges have very much happened for many. Even the cost of living and being able to afford basic necessities to pay our bills. And at the same time, we've noticed many people choosing a simpler lifestyle, decluttering their space, not wanting to spend as much, not wanting to be as materialistic, choosing a slower, simpler life. But yet, we also notice people you wouldn't expect declaring bankruptcy. I consider how many people online may show off their wealth, but actually, perhaps they're not as wealthy as we think they are. All right, so those are just a few examples, a few observations tied to Uranus in Taurus. There are, of course, going to be many more. So let us know. Let us know what you have to add. Okay, so on that note, let's go through your horoscopes, aka your Uranus in Taurus story. First up, we have Aries. Make sure to watch if you've got an Aries rising, and also just watch to see how things resonate if you've got the sun or moon in Aries. Right, Uranus has been transiting your second house, Aries, of finance, stability, security, assets, investments, banking, trade, profits, loss, gains, purchasing, spending habits. Oh my goodness, a lot of very practical things, material areas. So with Uranus traveling through this second house area for you, Aries, things have been disrupted when it comes to these very things, right? We have noticed things being shattered. Perhaps, for example, this is about financial loss, a lack of stability, a lack of consistency and security, matters being rather unpredictable, unstable, experiencing chaos when it comes to profits, earnings, at times wanting to pull your hair out because you think to yourself, when is it ever just gonna be peaceful and secure for me? But hey, what we've also noticed is these technological changes to do with your assets, to do with your earnings. I'm thinking about you maybe taking your skills online, right? Making money from your skills on social media, online. And that within itself has been quite inventive. You've maybe even experimented, right? You've been experimenting with new ways of doing things, thinking outside of the box. What can I change? How can I grow? How can I get ahead a little bit here? And maybe also we have seen the major breakthroughs on your behalf, breakthroughs related to security and being originality coming through here, maybe drawing from your skills of originality, seeing what sets you apart from others, talent wise, skill wise, Aries. Okay, at the same time, we've also noticed these Venus retrogrades, which occurred within a few signs during this Uranus and Taurus transit. So let's go through them briefly. At the end of 2018, maybe you entered this Uranus in Taurus transit with this feeling of, you know what, I want to try and show up differently when it comes to my relationships, when it comes to clients, customers, the exchange there, who you want to do business with, who you want to combine your resources and materials with. It's also been I would say, quite a journey when it comes to shared accounts, shared money, how you separate money. So that retrograde, so Venus retrograde towards 2018 could have been quite insightful. You gained a lot of perspective. And then by May, June time of 2020, there was the Venus retrograde, which happened in your third house. So innovation then also related to that of advertising, education. I imagine you taking things to another level when it came to educating yourself so that you could get ahead financially speaking. I'm just imagining you consistently trying to think ahead and move from this place of, I want to learn more. I want to do more research so that I can improve my skills, get better. Then by the end of December of 2021, coming into 2022, Venus was retrograde in your 10th house. All right, so this is where you took it up a notch professionally, Aries. I imagine you taking a leap of faith back then. I imagine you seeking maybe something greater or something that was more professional, more from a place of authority, from a place of mastery, right? I want to master this skill. I want to achieve a certain position, whatever that was for you, whatever the rule was for you. But indeed, I see this as you making a name for yourself, reputation wise, status wise, position wise. Fast forward to July, September time of 2023. We had the Venus retrograde in Leo in your fifth house. All right, so that retrograde was quite eye opening for you with relation to your creativity. Maybe you getting in touch again with your childlike innocence. I sort of imagine the lead up to that Venus retrograde, right? I imagine you maybe feeling a bit like, what is this all for? What does this all mean? I feel like I'm doing everything I can, but it's just challenging to keep up. So, Venus retrograde in Leo could have welcomed some sort of check in with yourself, right? A check in to do with, is this what you love? Do you enjoy this? Are you passionate about this? Asking yourself why you might want to earn money the way you do, why it is that you choose certain resources and possessions and materials over others. So, connecting more so with your childlike curiosity, I think, largely back then. And do we arrive at? We arrive at this Venus retrograde in your sign and partly in the sign before you, Pisces. So the retrograde of Venus from March until April of 2025, what's this all about? Well, I think this is your way then to honestly have a do-over. Have a do-over. What could this look like? This could look like you honestly reviewing your money situation, your earning situation, profits, assets, your security, your skills, your talents, your gifts. And then getting back to basics. But then equally, I think a part of this has involved spiritual insight, spiritual depth, maybe deciding to go on a different path, letting go, shedding, releasing, saying no more, no, I don't want to do that anymore, or actually, I welcome more of that because it's working, because it feels right for me. So, indeed, this is a retrograde that will help you blossom and bloom when it comes to the very relationship you have with the material world and deepening your understanding of that. And maybe even deciding to go off on a different path, head off on a different trail, a different quest, a different journey, basically, especially as Venus does re enter your sign Aries throughout the end of April coming into May. April coming into May 2025 specifically, by the way. And I also then think that throughout 2025, coming into 2026, you're still gonna be in this space of, okay, how can I innovate? How can I think outside of the box? What needs to change or shift so that I have greater stability and consistency? Or it could be a case of learning from those outside circumstances that have happened and moving from that place, moving from this place of stronger inner security, maybe in stronger inner self-worth, because even though life has thrown a lot of things at you, financially, materially, physically, right? You're still able to hold firm. You're still able to be secure within, right? And to learn, right? It's all about learning from those experiences. What has worked well? What hasn't worked well? What would you like to change? How might you want to adapt? How have you grown? These kinds of questions come up. Thank you so much, Aries. And now we are going to move on to Taurus. So, Taurus, Uranus has been in your sign since 2018. So, Uranus has been transiting your first house of appearance, your body, your physical condition, your health, your sense of self, your identity, your aims, your ambitions, your approach to life. This has been so much about new beginnings, new starts, fresh starts, right? And with that being said, sure, things perhaps have been rather rocky, turbulent, chaotic. You experiencing upheavals related to your security, related to your path and your direction. Because this is the thing with you, Taurus, it's very much okay, this is the path, it's dependable, I can trust this. There's routine there, there's consistency present. There's more of a desire to lead a stable path, a stable life, but yet Uranus has just thrown a spanner into the works, many of them, where outside circumstances, just things that are not so within your control, have pushed you, have tested your limits, tested your boundaries. And then we also notice, even possibly, your very physical condition, your body changing, your health changing in mighty powerful ways here, right? So I'm thinking to myself, is it with Uranus traveling through your first house? Many of you Taurians you've relocated, right? You've gotten your first house. You've maybe fallen pregnant. You've had a family. You've gotten married. Whatever it is to change your identity, basically. But then equally, we could look at this related to body concerns, health concerns. So, for instance, disruptions to do with your health, unpredictability, maybe having to go back and forth to the doctor, back and forth to the hospital, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, here we go again. When is this ever going to be stable and secure for me? It just feels like one thing after another. But yet, here's the other thing, when we think about your aims, we think about your ambitions and your path. This is where we've seen possible forms of excitement and inspiration, and you maybe being on this trajectory now, but then before the transit began, right? So that was before 2018, you lived a completely different life, completely different to where you are today. And maybe you look back in hindsight and you think, I never thought, right? I never thought I would get this job. I never thought I would make this kind of money. I never thought that I would have this life. I would live this kind of life. And of course, that can be in a positive way or a negative way, depending on your situation, depending on what way you look at it, right? So we've noticed major shifts to do with your sense of self and your path. But let's think about Venus and the Venus retrogrades since Uranus entered your sign. Let's take you back to the end of 2018, right? So, October, November time of 2018, the retrogrades of Venus, so Venus retrograde basically, happened in your 6th and 7th houses. So back then, maybe there was some kind of upheaval or a transformation or something that was confronting, something that was challenging relationship wise, partnership wise. Perhaps you had to move away from a relationship, end it. Could have been a separation, could have been a divorce, just as an example. Or that was more about you reevaluating your very values and your self worth when it comes to partnerships, when it comes to union. And then equally, we also see the revisiting of your routines and your habits and daily activities that you do, day to day stuff, and having to really think about, okay, do I feel balanced? Is this aligned with me? Is this a healthy work life balance? I feel like things are not so healthy. And so maybe this is a part of what Uranus coming into your sign highlighted. It was like a shock to your system, a shock to your body. Maybe in some way, Uranus has been trying to push through and trying to tell you something about your health, about your vitality, your physical condition. I think about how Uranus is the awakener, right? Uranus awakens, Uranus enlightens. It shocks us, it surprises us, it wakes us up to the truth, right? Of our situation. So maybe you were awakened to certain truths related to relationships, partnerships, work, co-workers, your health, oh my goodness, all those kinds of things back then. Fast forward to May, June of 2020, Venus retrograde then occurred in your second house. So that time period was quite important for you, resource wise, material wise, financial wise. And maybe it was a good opportunity for you to revisit your very relationship with money, with resources. Or maybe it was a good way for you to be somewhat inquisitive or curious and open, right? To be open to changes, to be somewhat more adaptable and flexible, sort of seeing, okay, streams of income, right? How can I maybe make more streams of income? Or, hey, I have this idea when it comes to maybe something that you are skilled at, something that you are very sort of gifted at, right? So ideas could have been pinging back then. Maybe education was a big part of it, wanting to educate yourself more so that you could become more skilled within a certain area, within a certain subject. By the end of 2021, so December 2021, coming into 2022, Venus retrograde then happened in your ninth house. All right, so that was a good way for you to truly focus on self mastery and professionalism related to your teachings, related to higher education. Maybe also it was a good way for you to focus on what you wanted to achieve long term, right? So to think about what you wanted to achieve long term when it came to publications or when it came to your offerings. And self exploration was a big part of that. Indeed, higher education, furthering yourself, wanting to improve intellectually, but also, heck, this could have been more of a spiritual thing, being on a bit of a spiritual quest or reviewing your spiritual values, your spiritual insights, your philosophies, your beliefs. Moving on, July until September of 2023, Venus retrograde was in Leo in your fourth house. So that retrograde was quite eye opening when it came to the past, your upbringing, your conditioning, family. Perhaps it was a good way for you to address certain topics and subjects with your family, or in some way, shape, or form, you were asked to step up with your family to maybe see what you wanted to change within the home, how to be somewhat more confident about yourself, or heck, this could have been about looking after your children, maybe especially wanting to have a child back then, or physically having a child, actually having a child, or having to make certain decisions about children, about family, about home, and so on. Your values really were a part of that. Now, we arrive at the Venus retrograde in your 12th and 11th houses. So the Venus retrograde from March until April of 2025. Therefore, this is a retrograde in which I think before Uranus leaves your sign, right? So Uranus is going to move into Gemini by July of 2025 for a few months. It's as if Venus retrograde behind you in these two houses behind you is offering you some insight to do with getting very quiet, stillness, a reset. I'm envisioning, I'm imagining this type of reset, this hold on, let us slow this way down to really assess where I am spiritually, where I am when it comes to recovery. My own personal healing journey is a big part of it, right? Especially if it is that you've been coming up against certain health issues over recent years. Perhaps you've been trying different methods, trying different approaches to help yourself. Heck, it could also be you being involved in some kind of spiritual practice, wanting to go on a retreat, just focusing on your own healing, maybe extra hospital visits, having to support yourself mental health wise. And then, equally, I think this is a way for you to maybe see which kinds of people you align with, spiritually speaking. Which friendships do you align with? Who is for you? Who is not for you? Who have you outgrown? Who would you like to take into the next phase of your life? And do just remember then as well, Taurus, that Uranus will not officially leave your sign until April of 2026. So thinking about your season next year. So maybe try and use the duration of Uranus's stay in your sign as a way to see, oh my gosh, right? I've changed as a person. My outlook on life, how I present myself to the world has really changed. What I value about myself, my self-worth has changed massively. What I'm willing to tolerate from other people and what I'm not. Maybe also it is actually that your literal security, your actual stability has changed massively. And that is a big part of your journey, right? Those changes are what are really pushing you to maybe head on a different way, to go on a different quest and to see what else the world has to offer. Major insights here and major revelations. And maybe also a big part of this is about freedom. Maybe a big part of this is about a breakthrough, being open to a new path, a new way. And that stuff is very much about your sense of self, your identity. Thank you so much, Taurus. And now on to Gemini. So, Gemini, Uranus has been traveling through your 12th house since 2018. All right. So we're thinking here about being in a cocooning phase. We're thinking here about your sleeping patterns, your sleeping habits, your dreams, your fantasies, your imagination, escapism, your fears really being prominent and coming up, your spiritual values, and also the hidden self, what you keep secret, what you keep private, your private self, your self undoing, feelings of entrapment, imprisonment. So Uranus traveling through this area of life for you has been quite the eye-opener. You seeing things in a flash, you experiencing perhaps what has felt like Tower moments, right? Where out of nowhere, out of the blue, things change drastically, massively for you on a psychological level, a spiritual level. Could also be, of course, that behind the scenes activity has involved upheaval, chaos to do with your resources and your security. So to consider this part of the self or this part of your life that is hidden. For example, not really wanting to share with other people whenever you experience a financial difficulty, a financial concern. Or this could even be that you are seeking some kind of freedom and liberation to do with your personal resources, your personal finances. Maybe you are seeking a different path materially, financially, when it comes to your earnings and your spending habits. Again, to me, it suggests that a lot of this is hush hush. A lot of this is being kept to yourself, it's being kept private. It's nobody else's business, right? And then what I'm also considering here when we think about sleep and dreams and all the rest of it, well, it could be that you've been experiencing trouble sleeping more so than what you normally would, perhaps during this transit. Or it's that your fears to do with freedom, your fears to do with being yourself and your uniqueness, these things have been challenged, I think, in some way. But that within itself has been quite insightful because I think that you've been pushing yourself, you've been committing to a certain plan of action, or you've been saying, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to tolerate this, I'm going to speak for truth. And I'm also considering a lot of inspiration and the breakthroughs that have happened within your cocooning phase behind the scenes out of the public eye. The inner work, oh my goodness, Gemini. The inner work that you have performed over recent years, absolutely mind blowing. And this stuff is going to prepare you for what's to come as Uranus enters your sign by July, and of course, for its full transit by the end of April of 2026. Though, let's take a moment to go through the retrogrades. Let's take you back then to the end of 2018. All right, there was the Venus retrograde in both your fifth and sixth houses back then. Therefore, we noticed perhaps an honest review of your health, any health concerns, any health issues that maybe came up to the surface that you needed to take a closer look at. Plus, we also could look at this through a lens of major shifts to do with your routines and your habits, perhaps reaching a bit of a breaking point or reaching a point of, I can't do this anymore, needing to change, being forced to change something about work, about your everyday. Your stress levels could have been quite significant around that time. Something about your stress levels there. Blood pressure, for example. Okay, we also noticed then some reviewing and reassessment related to your romantic relationships, lovers, partners. So to think about your love interests, about dating, romantic feelings, uh, sexual expression as well, conversations related to children, or perhaps you getting into some new significant relationship back then, which very much changed how you went about doing things. Or heck, this could have also been related to your hobbies or your creativity. For example, maybe you deciding to spend some more time on your own and being creative, right? So taking that time and looking over your style, your creativity, art forms. Fast forward to May, June of 2020, Venus retrograde was in your sign Gemini, and therefore that could have certainly felt like a bit of a glow up, so to speak, or it was maybe an opportunity for you to take a closer look at your very appearance or the relationship that you have with yourself, right? How you view yourself, how you appear, beauty wise, style wise, fashion wise, appearance wise. Yes, your appearance could have changed massively, especially from a more psychological standpoint, a spiritual standpoint. And perhaps also there was something related to your path, right? Your quest, new beginnings, new opportunities, maybe tied to finances, tied to your belongings and your resources. Maybe some of you deciding to change things quite massively when we consider how much you earn back then, or deciding to make changes to do with your earnings, to do with your resources, and to do with your assets. And then by December, so coming towards the end of December 2021 into 2022, Venus was retrograde in Capricorn. So that would have happened in your 8th house. All right. So that one honestly was pretty intense. It was a time of possibly upheaval, possibly very chaotic. The truth was revealed, related to control, related to feeling trapped, or it was a way for you to look within yourself and see how you might have been limiting yourself, blocking yourself from feeling good about yourself, or from maybe going after the things that you wanted to achieve, financially speaking. Your values could have been massively challenged back then. But I think a big part of that was that people couldn't really see, right? A lot of that stuff was private, and the depths of the emotion of your emotions back then could have been rather significant. I even think about a significant loss or grief, something like that, that could have occurred around that time, or the anticipation of loss. Okay, so July, September of 2023, Venus retrograde happens in Leo. So that would have occurred in your 3rd house. All right, so that retrograde, a bit lighter, I guess you could say, than the previous one, which, by the way, I even think with Venus retrograde in Capricorn coming towards the end of 2021 into 2022, that could have also been quite eye-opening, intimate-wise, right? Trust-wise, considering your sexuality, intimacy, opening up with other people about your deepest desires, your sexual urges. Okay, so yes, with Venus retrograde in Leo around July until September of 2023, well, that retrograde perhaps involved, could have been relocating. It could have been some new desire to do with your neighborhood, to do with your local area, perhaps wanting to make significant changes nearby, right? So more nearby, more local. So we could see perhaps you seeking greater fun and spontaneity, or it could also be that you revisited how you learned back then, how you spoke with confidence, with self assurance, or perhaps communication was looked over more so. Thinking about certain courses that you wanted to take on out of fun, just literally for fun, literally for pleasure. Your common basic interests were really looked over back then. How you showed up on social media, possibly, was revisited. And maybe a part of that was about, okay, what do I want to keep private? What do I want to keep to myself? Maybe even involving children. If you wanted to show your children on social media, for example, maybe there were questions that came up. Okay, so then we come to today, March, April of 2025. And we have the Venus retrograde happening in both your 10th and 11th houses, Gemini. All right, so this retrograde is, yes, it's from March until April. And this is a retrograde where it's your opportunity to look over, okay, which kinds of people do I surround myself with? Which kinds of friends do I have in my life and which kinds of communities do I value, do I appreciate. There could be some form of needing to push yourself or be brave about new friendships, or even having to look over previous friendships and relationships and the very value of them. And also bravery related to, okay, well, what about my hopes for the future? Is there anything else that I want to maybe bring into my reality, manifest, if you will? So, all of this stuff is then being, I suppose, in a way, filtered through this inner part of you that's seeking freedom and is seeking to innovate and is seeking to experiment behind the scenes. Could also be themes here to do with your very career, your reputation, your public image. Okay, so these are the kinds of areas that you have also been taking a closer look at recently. Of course, you could be watching this though after the retrograde, so there is that. Though, just quickly, as Uranus continues through its final months in Taurus, so we're thinking about coming into 2026, right? So from 2025 into 2026, maybe it's a good way for you, Gemini, to honestly look over how much you have changed internally, how much you have changed when it comes to your hidden self, your unconscious. And to see that by being in this recovery stage or the cocooning stage, that has massively been supportive for you, even though it may be difficult to see it that way, because, yeah, it could feel like you've been going through it, Gemini, just one thing after another, continuously having to reinvent yourself or change things, having to adapt, having to adjust, even though you're thinking to yourself, can it just be steady and stable for a moment? Give me a break. Still, however, hopefully, this is your opportunity, Gemini, to look back and to say, I've made it through, and I can see how much I've changed, how much you have evolved from the inside out, Gemini. Thank you so much, Gemini. And now we're going to move on to Cancer. So, Cancer, Uranus has been transiting your 11th house since 2018. So, we want to think about this area of life related to that of the masses, groups, communities, networks, causes, fans, ideologies, social media, social influence, resources from others, fame, your hopes and wishes. So with Uranus then coming into this area of life, we see the disruptions. We see the major shifts when it comes to groups, when it comes to group identity, being a part of something bigger than yourself, belonging, and at the same time, seeking something that is stable and consistent within these particular groups and teams and communities. So, for instance, this could be about you being on pretty unsteady ground, the unpredictability, the unstable feeling when it comes to particular people in your life, maybe outgrowing certain friendships, relationships, or this could show up as unexpected changes to do with friends, unexpected moments of clarity, these sudden realizations about friendships and belonging. But also, this could be about how you show up on social media. So, for example, you could have said to yourself before Uranus entered Taurus, oh, no, 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 I would never put myself out there online like that. No, 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 not in a million years. Then here's Uranus and says, well, never say never. But then, hey, this could also be about your hopes and wishes for the future changing. So you perhaps thinking to yourself, you know what, I want this for my future. I see my future in this way, and you being quite firm, quite set, committed to whatever that vision was. And then again, Uranus comes along and shakes things up, and you're left there thinking, wow, I did not see that coming. I didn't think that this would be a part of my story. This would be a part of my path. These people would be in my life, or these people wouldn't be in my life. And heck, this could also be about certain causes or charities that you give to or that you start. Maybe even particular communities or groups that you have started yourself. You've been on a mission, Cancer. You've been on this mission of trying to find people you relate to, people that share the same or similar values as you. Maybe getting to a point where you think, you know, I can't, I physically can't be around people who do not align with my values. And that's final and that's okay, right? So that's a part of your growth, I think. Aligning with like minded individuals and acquaintances, just people who get you on a material level, on a physical level, heck, even on a spiritual level, Cancer. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to assess the Venus retrogrades since 2018. All right, so Venus was retrograde at the end of 2018, happening in your, let me just take a second here. Yes, fourth house and fifth house. So the Venus retrograde happening in your fourth and fifth houses towards the end of 2018 could have welcomed maybe a bit of an insight as to how you showed up within romantic relationships back then, the intensity of them, the need for trust or the lack thereof. Or it could have shown up as disruptions to do with your home, your family, right? Having to maybe reassess where you were security wise, especially on an emotional level there. Thinking about what you needed back then when it came to partnerships and relationships. Thinking about being a team player. And then fast forward to May, June of 2020, Venus retrograde in Gemini. Well, that occurred in the sign behind you. So it occurred in your 12th house. Yeah, well, that retrograde could have been quite eye opening spiritually. It could have been that you encountered soulmate connections, or it's that you took some time for yourself. Maybe self care is a big thing back then. Or it's that you did a lot of studying, you joined a course, you thought over, okay, well, what would I like to perhaps study or research or look into? I kind of think about how, well, we were experiencing the lockdowns back then. Many of us had way too much time on our hands. And so I do wonder about you, Cancer. Is it that you gravitated towards certain projects, hobbies, you you gravitated towards certain people, communities, groups? And then fast forward to the end of December of 2021, coming into 2022, Venus retrograde happened in the sign opposite you. Therefore, that retrograde was confronting, maybe having to look within yourself and think about your own productivity levels or your own security when it came to one partnerships, maybe having to be a bit more business minded or having to be a bit more professional or having to look over certain contracts and agreements back then, considering how you and a partner, how you joined together, how you were a team or you still are a team. Looking over matters more practically and being realistic about the outcomes, being realistic about the kinds of financial situations that you revisited back then. Then, July, September of 2023, Venus retrograde in Leo occurred in your second house. So that was perhaps quite a good way for you to go over your very value system, and your relationship with the material world. Perhaps a part of that involved leadership, being creative. Your skills, your talents were a big part of that as well. Maybe refining your skills and talents back then, perhaps for leadership reasons, for creativity reasons, performative, entertaining reasons. But overall, yes, Cancer, that was a good way for you to honestly look over your finances and your possessions. And then we come to March, April time of 2025, and we've got Venus retrograde happening in your 10th and 9th houses, Cancer. All right, so it seems as if 2025 welcomes an honest review tied to the next step for you, professional wise, professionally speaking. Let's think about the kind of leader you want to be within society, the way you want to show up amongst the public, your very public image, your public life coming into focus here, Cancer. And you perhaps being called to be brave, to make some significant changes for the better, and to also consider what it is that you want in terms of, well, where you live, where you want to move to. Maybe some traveling is involved here or required on your behalf. It's maybe about also what your philosophies are, what your spiritual views are, your religious views. Perhaps taking some time to go within and to consider, okay, what still aligns with you? What doesn't align with you anymore? And maybe these kinds of matters are, of course, they are being joined together with that of your hopes and wishes. So I imagine this as, for example, okay, there is a significant change, a significant shift that happens related to your career around this time, or you're trying to make sense of a career situation. And then maybe because of that, you have to change something about your hopes and wishes, about your future, right? Thinking about your future aims with the 11th house. Maybe there is some uncertainty present in this regard. Or it's that you feel quite committed to your path and you're willing to learn, you're willing to adjust, to try new things. So it's certainly going to be interesting, I think, whenever Uranus does move into your 12th house, Cancer, in Gemini, because that could be certainly where a lot of the behind the scenes stuff is going to be looked at, educational wise, research wise. Okay, what I also want to say then before we finish off here, Cancer, for you is that remember, Uranus will finish up in your 11th house. Therefore, from now until about April of 2026, maybe try and just consider who is in your life, right? Which kinds of people do you involve yourself with or around now? And maybe things have massively changed, right? You could look back before the transit, before 2018, and you could think to yourself, do you know what? I've met a lot of really, really interesting people. And it's thanks to them that I know what I know. And I'm able to learn from them. I'm able to join together with these people. And so I'm really appreciative. Or you can look back and think, heck, before 2018, I didn't even own a car. I didn't even own a house. I didn't even know what the heck would be the next step for me. But here I am. And I'm feeling really grateful. So yes, could be a way for you to reflect and to consider what has changed for you collective wise, ideology wise, teamwork wise, social media wise, right? When we consider again with the 11th house ruling our social influence. For example, you making money via social media. Thank you so much, Cancer. And now on to Leo. All right, Leo, Uranus has been transiting your 10th house of authority, business, career, achievement, reputation, social image, your public life. This person that you are striving to become. And what I'm going to say with this one, Leo, is with Taurus in the 10th house, it does appear as if the person you are striving to become and the person that you desire to become known for, well, that person is grounded, is consistent, is intentional, comfortable within themselves, steady, and is a pretty well balanced, sensible person. Someone who is committed to what they do. I really think about this through a lens of loyalty here for you, Leo. And so, with Uranus traveling through this 10th house arena for you over the past 7 to 8 years, well, we have noticed the upheavals, the disruptions, chaos to do with your social image, to do with your reputation. What I imagine here is you reaching your limits, or you desiring a change, or being forced to change. So, outside circumstances forcing you to change, pushing you into unfamiliar, unknown territories, and that feeling quite rocky and shaky and scary, right? Where you think, oh my gosh, I don't know. Can I do this? Do I have what it takes? And with that being said, certain structures, perhaps, certain ways that you organize things changing. So when I think about this, it's about what has been tried and tested, what is comfortable, what is familiar to you. But you see, Uranus says it's time to be okay with being uncomfortable. It's time to reach new heights, to experience breakthroughs, to revolutionize the way you show up career wise, professional wise. And this could also manifest as you finally deciding to start that business, right? So maybe when you look back, right, you look to before Uranus entered Taurus, so pre 2018, and you never would have thought, right? You never would have thought in a million years. This is very Uranus, by the way. You never would have thought in a million years that you would start that business, you would start that company. Heck, I even see this with Cancer too, right? Cancer could be similar themes, because for Cancer, it could also be a similar story of that organization. I went for it. That company, I joined it. That firm, I started it. Very innovating indeed. So we see the innovation tied to your career path here, Leo. And we also see your public life changing drastically. Now, what we want to do is we want to consider the Venus retrogrades. All right. So let's take you back to the end of 2018, and Venus retrograde happened in your fourth and third houses. So back then, you know what? It could have been, Leo, for many of you Leos out there. It felt like you reached your rock bottom, possibly. Or it could have been that things were just so turbulent and so chaotic, you thought, I need out of here. I can't be here. I need to fly. I need to take control of my life. I need to think about me. Or it could have been an opportunity for you to consider how you speak, how you communicate, communicating your needs, communicating your values, your desires, your interests, what you like. And heck, it could be that these likes and these interests and your creative ideas are tied to that of what you want to do professionally or what you want to do within a business. and the changes that you want to make. I mean, I even look at this as you wanting to make decisions for yourself when it comes to your career, not wanting to be confined, limited, controlled, told you must do this, you must do that. This is about your freedom. This is about your independence, I think. So to think for yourself, Leo. And what we further then see is May, June time of 2020, Venus retrograde happened in your 11th house. All right, well, that could have been a time of honestly thinking over, okay, well, what is my message? What is my message to the collective? What are my political views or my social views or my environmental views? What do I actually think? And which kinds of people do I align with? Who do I communicate with about this stuff? Who gets me? Who doesn't get me? This like-minded attitude, essentially, right? Forming alliances, even starting that social media page, joining that certain community, taking the leap and deciding, do you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna try and connect with people in a different way. Fast forward to the end of December of 2021, coming into 2022, Venus retrograde happened in your sixth house. All right, so Leo, that was a retrograde where you visited, you looked over the very foundation of your work, your schedules, your daily habits, how you spend your days, how you spend your time. So it was a good way for you to be mature, for you to be responsible. It was a good opportunity for you to go over the plan, even health wise, fitness wise, productivity wise. Great for that. And then we also want to think about the Venus retrograde, which happened in your sign, right? So there was Venus retrograde that happened throughout the summer of 2023, July until September, in your first house. That Venus retrograde, Leo, was a way for you to return to yourself, right? And what do I mean by this? I think it was such a good opportunity for you to look over, okay, what do I want? Regardless of this person and this boss and this manager and this label and this role, this position, what is it that I'm really wanting with my life, and what are my aims? What about my physical condition, my health, my body? Am I taking care of my body? That summer could have been really very eye-opening and an opportunity for you to connect with your body, connect with your values, to review your sense of self, and to get in alignment with your creative path, because this is you, Leo. Your life path is so much about self-expression, creativity, being vibrant. Yes, expressing yourself confidently so. And then we arrive at today. And from March until April of 2025, Venus retrograde is happening in your ninth and eighth houses. This one is quite the opportunity for you, belief wise, philosophically speaking, to consider, okay, well, what are my worldviews? And where would I like to travel to? And which kinds of subjects, topics do I want to learn about? Or how do I wish to further myself knowledge wise? What are my teachings? It has been a good opportunity for you to go within and to consider what your aspirations are. And it's a good way for you to really go on this spiritual journey, this philosophical journey. Equally, it has been quite the heavy transit, right? With Venus, a part of Venus retrograde happening in your eighth. So maybe a lot of heaviness emotionally, a lot of sensitive matters coming to the surface, secrecy here, the truth being revealed perhaps about love, about connection, about intimacy. Trust is a big part of this. Committing. So committing to yourself, or just commitment when it comes to you and another person, that bond, the emotional bond that happens. So this is all about taking a closer look and being quite gentle with yourself, I hope. Creating more of a tenderness. Good way to explore your depths, your emotional depths, Leo, which honestly could also involve some pain, okay? Pain and suffering. Though, what I will say is that throughout the rest of 2025 and coming into 2026, so until April of 2026, it's a good way, I think, towards the end of Uranus's time in your 10th house. Well, it's a good way for you to perhaps see, all right, how have you grown professionally? Maybe you have pushed yourself massively outside of your comfort zone over these years, and you've still a few other projects or actions to take, with Uranus continuing on a little bit. But still, I think it's a good way for you to maybe look at this from this place of, well, this is how I have grown, how I have assessed any limiting beliefs that hold me back, and to consider how you have applied yourself, how you've applied yourself when it comes to your career, your business, when it comes to achievements and accomplishments for the long term, seeing in which ways you have added your unique spin to these very areas. Thank you, Leo. And now on to Virgo. All right, Virgo, let's talk about you. Uranus has been transiting your 9th house since 2018. This 9th house of higher education, university, degrees, diplomas, spirituality, publications, thinking in the abstract, philosophy, long distance travel, your personal sort of worldviews, your teachings, your offerings, your guidance, your meaning, religion, self-exploration, seeking to learn more, seeking to widen your vision, to widen your views. So with Uranus coming along and moving through this 9th house arena for you, Virgo, we have seen major shifts in awareness, major shifts in consciousness. The truth coming up via travel experiences, meeting new people, exploring different cultures and ways of life, the unpredictable happening when it comes to that of, well, higher education. So, for example, before Uranus entered your 9th house, you could have been studying a particular subject at university. I'm going to speak here about my own experience because Virgo is on the rising in my chart. So I actually studied travel and tourism at university. So that is what my degree is in. And before Uranus entered Taurus, I didn't know about astrology. And since Uranus had moved into Taurus, it's safe to say that my worldviews and how I maybe look at the world, how I think of life, and when it comes to the meaning of life, I see things much differently because I discovered astrology, right? So that's a different lens. That's a completely different view. And I was raised in a Christian household. So that's very, very different. A Christian household that was very much against anything like astrology, by the way. So, yes, Virgo, Maybe you thought, heck, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna study to be this. I am gonna commit my life to this position. And then Uranus comes in and says, "You want to bet?" Honestly, to me, Uranus is this planet that says, "You didn't see that coming, did you?" And so we are shocked, we are surprised. And I guess that is a bit of the paradox when it comes to talking about Uranus transits, because we can say with Uranus that, well, unexpected shifts are going to happen here, here, and here. But really, it's so surprising, it's so disruptive. And it's done in a way that you don't see coming, you don't really expect. Nothing can really prepare you for a Uranus transit. So, in hindsight, Virgo, maybe in a way, you're partly glad, right? You're glad in a way that things have changed. Your philosophical views have changed. Your religious views have changed. Faith here. And equally, perhaps long distance travel drastically changed for you. Maybe a travel experience is what opened you up. It awakened you to something higher, something very different to what you knew before. Okay, now what we want to do is, oh, and also your morals and your ethics. I want to highlight that, right? The ninth house is also about our morals and our ethics. For example, something that you thought was morally correct is not the case anymore, or vice versa. And your publications, I also just want to touch on your publications and teachings, because we can look at this as you wanting to be inventive, wanting to experiment with new ways of doing things, to think outside of the box, publication wise, teaching wise. And the thing about Taurus, of course, in the ninth, is that when it comes to your teachings and your publications, you're going to make things practical. It's all about practical usage with Taurus in the ninth. All right, let's now explore these Venus retrogrades. Let's take you back to the end of 2018. The Venus retrograde then happened in your second and third houses. All right. So that retrograde was an opportunity for you to dig a little bit deeper. It was a good way for you to identify on an emotional level with information. It could have also been quite a triggering time, communication wise. Equally, it was a good way for you to maybe look at a more balanced approach when it came to, could be how you earn money back then. It could be a balancing approach related to your skills, your gifts, and then considering how those skills and gifts show up through what you offer, through your teachings, right? And the research, right? Greater investigation, greater research back then, and then wanting to bring that research and make it tangible for people. Fast forward to May, June of 2020, Venus retrograde happened in your 10th house. That was a really good opportunity, Virgo, for you to, in so many words, rebrand yourself. It was a good way for you to look over your style, your designs, your message, your social media presence, your reputation was revisited through this lens of communication and teaching, and maybe wanting to be seen as professional, to be seen as someone who knows what they're talking about, right? Those are the kinds of themes that you looked over back then. Fast forward to the end of 2021, coming into 2022, Venus retrograde happened in your 5th house. All right, that was a good way for you to look over the very foundation, the very structure of your creative projects, to look at your creativity from this more professional place and to apply yourself, to commit yourself to change a few things, right? Related to your creativity. But equally, maybe it was a good way for you to go over serious conversations and discussions with your partner about children, about providing for your children, whether that be you having children or thinking about having them in the future. Your romantic relationships, I think, were also looked over through this more practical lens back then. Maybe a few serious discussions were had. Okay, so July until September of 2023, Venus retrograde happened in Leo in your 12th house. All right, so that retrograde was quite spiritually enlightening. It was a good way for you to reconnect, right? For you to reconnect with your creativity, with your innocence, with your childlikeness. And much of that was about you being alone, you being in seclusion, you being in this cocooning phase. Just going to say that I remember that retrograde because that summer I spent it just watching loads of Disney movies, revisiting my youth, revisiting my childhood. And what I loved about that is that it helped reset me, right? Transits through the 12th house help reset us. They give us an opportunity to go within, to restore, right? It's a good way to recharge our energy, come back to ourselves. Okay, so then we arrive at today. And the Venus retrograde is happening from March until April of 2025 in Aries and Pisces. So occurring in both your 8th and 7th houses here, Virgo. So this particular Venus retrograde has been quite eye-opening for you, intimacy-wise, sexuality-wise, considering your psyche, any repression related to anger there perhaps, considering self-assertion, standing up for yourself, those themes coming up, being awakened within you. And then also we see here certain relationships being revisited, explored, maybe certain relationships coming to an end, or thinking about your own healing journey when it comes to other people. And learning from the past, learning from those experiences could also be about your message when it comes to clients and customers, taking more of an intuitive approach, trusting your intuition, trusting that spiritual guidance when it comes to business relationships. And perhaps by you taking that time to review more of the business side of things, client side of things, partnerships, things like that, then through such a review and by you taking some time to honestly reflect, well, that information could perhaps be used as a way to help you identify with, okay, well, this is the next stage when it comes to my publications or what I offer, what I teach, or this is the next step in my journey when it comes to traveling, possibly having these aspirations to want to move or change how you earn money, right? So considering that stuff more from a place of your beliefs or challenging any limiting beliefs, especially related to money, right? Still, Virgo, take some time then. So take some time throughout 2025, coming into 2026, to consider just how much your worldviews and your beliefs have changed, drastically speaking. And how it's those very beliefs that you have about yourself, about the world, that can naturally play out physically, practically. Thank you so much, Virgo. And now we're going to move on to Libra. So, Libra, Uranus has been transiting your eighth house since 2018. And we want to think about this eighth house arena to do with taxes, debts, loss, grief, intimacy, trust, secrecy, criminal activity, death, conception, partner's money, right? So, your partner's money, joint resources, joint ventures, sharing. So, this could be sharing physically, financially, but also sharing emotionally. So, trust is a part of this, commitment, vulnerability. So, with Uranus traveling through this house for you, we're seeing the major shakeups, we're seeing the chaos, and we're seeing the loss. I'm thinking to myself, Libra, is it that when it comes to loss and grief, you have not stopped for a moment, it seems? The minute you try to feel relaxed, you try to feel settled, secure, safe within yourself, there's another drama. There's something about a loss, there's something about an upheaval. And this just creates so much chaos within your life. It surrounds you. Maybe in this regard, Libra, you've had to be very mindful about the kinds of people you let into your space, into your life. You've had to say, hold on, I'm not going to put up with this behavior. This could also manifest, though, as a particular separation, a divorce that has happened in recent years. Could also manifest as sudden disruptions to do with debts, taxes, having to pay people back, owing people money, discovering that criminal activity has happened, someone's stolen from you, someone's lied to you, right? The drama of it all, Libra. But then again, you know what? This could also manifest as a pleasant surprise, okay? Something pleasantly surprising about children, about marriage, about joining together financially with another. For example, perhaps before Uranus entered Taurus, you thought that your life would go a certain way. Maybe children wise, right? Maybe you thought to yourself, no, I'm never having children. Or could have been the opposite way of, yes, I really, really, really want to have children. But as Uranus has traveled through your eighth house, things have changed. Matters are not the same, right? And the unpredictability has occurred there. So you could be sitting today and you think, "Whoa, I have a family now. Whoa, I have a house now. Oh my goodness, I have all these responsibilities. I have all these bills I need to pay now. Flip, I didn't see that coming." But then again, it could also manifest as, "Flip, I never thought I would be single at this point in my life. I didn't think that. I didn't think that I wouldn't have kids. And actually, you know what? I'm pretty comfortable with the fact that I don't have kids right now." Right? You maybe think to yourself, how the heck am I going to afford to raise a family? Because the economy is just so up and down. It's crazy. It's quite unsettling in a way. Now, with that being said, what we want to do is we want to consider Venus and the Venus retrogrades that have occurred since 2018. All right, so beginning, right, we have the end of 2018 and the Venus retrograde happened in your sign, Libra, partly in your sign, and then also in Scorpio. So back then, perhaps that was a way of you reconsidering, reevaluating, what do I want? What is the next step for me? Relationship wise, partnership wise, unity wise. What do I desire? What do I attract? What would I like to attract into my life? Big themes there to do with looking over partnerships, resources, finances, etc. Maybe also your very physical condition, your health, your body was looked at and looked at from a place of needing greater balance in your life. But equally, it was a time of having to reevaluate your relationship with the material world, the upheavals, the transformations. Maybe you took greater charge of your life, greater control of your life back then. You thought, no, we're not dealing with this up and down, this chaotic influence. I need something that's more stable and steady. And I'm gonna be determined. I'm gonna fight for myself, protect myself. May, June 2020, Venus retrograde happened in Gemini. So that occurred in your ninth house. So that Venus retrograde could have been quite eye opening for you, higher education wise. So I imagine you being quite the student back then. I imagine you wanting to further yourself, wanting to maybe get ahead within your career, taking on some sort of advanced training program back then, just educating, right? Educating yourself, as I'm saying here. Yes. And then possibly making money from doing that, thinking more so about, well, if I do get this degree or if I do get this qualification, that's going to help me massively within my career, within my profession. Great. Fast forward to the end of 2021, the end of 2021 coming into 2022. Venus retrograde happened in your fourth. All right. That retrograde, my goodness, that could have been quite testing, quite challenging for you when we consider your living situation, family, housing, property, ownership, the hardships that could have occurred around then. Maybe in somehow, some way, that a part of that was linked to debt, a part of that was linked to having to repay people, having to maybe go through a loss, grief could have been a part of it. Maybe also a part of that was about moving, having to relocate. And so we see here for you, Libra, back then, you having to remain quite structured and disciplined and controlled within family settings, having to be responsible when it came to your living situation. Fast forward to July until September of 2023, Venus retrograde happened in your 11th house. All right. So that retrograde was, hey, it was quite interesting because it invited themes to do with communities and friendships and feeling seen, right? Feeling seen within those very areas, within those groups. Closeness was perhaps reevaluated and being validated by other people. Maybe joining together with like minds, maybe wanting to start a certain group of your own. You could have been flirting with that idea back then. Or it's that you had some creative visions, your creative visions about maybe joining together, getting people within a team, within a group, so that you're all sort of coming together with a similar vision, a similar creative vision. But it's you that could have started that. It's you that could have pushed for that in some way. And then we come to today. Today, and Venus retrograde is happening in Aries and Pisces. So happening in your seventh and your sixth houses from March until April of 2025. Okay, so Libra, this is a good opportunity for you to consider, okay, well, how is it that I show up within these one-to-one relationships? Is there something I want to change about my approach? How can I learn from other people about self-assertion, about being a leader, being a bit of a pioneer, maybe setting out on a new path when it comes to one-to-one connections? Could be business partnerships that are really a part of this. But equally, having to re-strategize, reprioritize your routines and your schedules. So, you, for example, could have this vision in mind about, okay, this is the kind of leader I want to be. This is the kind of boss I want to be. This is how I want to assert myself within business when it comes to contracts and agreements, partnerships, etc. But you know what? I also have a few things that I need to adjust. I got to be honest with myself about the workload, about maybe overextending myself, about my health. My goodness, health is major here. Health. And then I also sort of think about you reaching out to people, reaching out for support, being honest about anything that you're struggling with internally. So if it is that you have been feeling quite chaotic or things have been extra disruptive, I wonder who is in your life that can support you. Who can you reach out to? And do you choose to reach out? Is it that you can actually keep a lot of that in, keep a lot of that to yourself, be quite private and hidden? Something to think about. Though, though, throughout 2025 and coming into 2026, right, because Uranus is still finishing up in your 8th house, Libra, maybe it is a good way for you to reflect somewhat and to consider, okay, well, actually, whenever I look over my life, I can see how I've taken responsibility for myself. I can see how my financial position has changed massively, how I've changed when it comes to joint resources and sharing of myself. Maybe you feel like you are a lot more trustworthy of other people, for example, or you feel like there is a greater intimate connection that has formed over recent years. And of course, when we think about intimacy, that could be with your spouse, that could be with a close friend, a close relative. And this could also be where, sure, there's some sadness in this. There could be some sadness that you reflect upon. You kind of think, yeah, such and such is not here anymore. Or I can't believe that that crime happened and nobody was there to support me through that. Or this is the kind of lesson I have learned from my trauma. Or this is how I feel a lot more free because I was able to address my repressed emotions. Thank you so much, Libra. And now on to Scorpio. Okay, so Scorpio, Uranus has been traveling through your 7th house since 2018. So, your 7th house of alliances, opponents, partners, collaborations, agreements, open enemies, the unconscious, so the unconscious part of yourself that is reflected back at you through others. Yeah, clients, customers, marriage, divorce. So, with Uranus traveling through this area of your life, perhaps the unexpected has happened. The unpredictable has happened, right? So, if you think back to before Uranus entered Taurus, if you think back to before 2018, maybe you thought to yourself, not in a million years, I'm never going to get married. Or I know exactly the kind of person I want to get married to. Or this is the person I'm going to be with for the rest of my life. But actually, things have changed. And you could be married right now with a family to someone that you never thought you would be married to. Or it could be that you are currently single and you think, wow, I really, really thought we were going to be committed for the rest of our lives, but I guess not. So, yes, relationships have certainly changed in unexpected ways. And we also notice the instability of it all, I guess. Things feeling rocky and not very secure. So maybe this could show up within contracts and agreements. For instance, a particular contract or an agreement with an employer, which you signed and you thought, yes, yes, this is what I'm committing to, this is what I'm agreeing to. But actually, things have been disrupted. Things have not been so stable. And maybe you've had to go back to the drawing board time and time again. You've had to revisit partnerships and collaborations and who you can trust. And it could even be here, Scorpio, that it feels a bit never ending, right? It just feels a bit like, when is this going to stop? I just can't deal with chaotic people. I even imagine this as chaotic people coming in like tornadoes in your life. And you're thinking, oh my word, why am I attracting these people? People who are so up and down. They don't know how to soothe themselves. They don't know how to just sit in an emotion and feel it. They have to project it onto me. Right? So we see these feelings of instability, but equally, we also see breakthroughs. We see especially breakthroughs related to, could be close friends, close relatives. Maybe you feel like you're finally getting somewhere with a close relative. So, for example, maybe before 2018, you had issues. Could have been with your parent, could have been with your child, with your relative, right? Could be a sibling. But actually, in hindsight, you think, I'm really glad that we gave it another shot. I'm really glad that I was able to put my pride to the side a little bit and hear that person out. Or they've changed. Maybe you've noticed how much other people within your life have changed. Yes, could be for better or for worse. So these are the kinds of themes that we notice. Heck, we also could look at this as people you thought were your friends, then becoming enemies. People you thought were your enemies switching sides and becoming your friends, right? It could also be that out of nowhere, an open enemy appears and you're like, what? I thought we were good, right? I thought we were good, but clearly not. Interesting. Very, very interesting. All right. Let's now think about Venus. Venus retrograde happened at the end of 2018. So that occurred partly in your sign and then also in the sign behind you, Libra, in the 12th and the first houses. So that Venus retrograde, well, maybe it involved some breakup or an ending, or especially a relationship ending. It doesn't have to be romantically, but some kind of relationship coming to a close. It could also have been a time of having to really look over your life and your trajectory and your aims, your identity, maybe making a significant change, maybe needing some time to reflect, to go within, to just restore some healthy balance and harmony within your life. But a lot of that happening, of course, behind the scenes, right? And then fast forward to May, June of 2020, Venus retrograde happens in your eighth house. So that retrograde could have really been a time of you feeling like you were being tested, you feeling like, especially intimate partners, pushing your buttons. And by intimate partners, yes, I mean this could have been your significant other. So, for example, your significant other pushing you to such an extent that you had to look within yourself, having to look at projections, having to look at your fears, having to explore your unconscious drives and motivations, or any lack of trust, perhaps, either from you or the other. But equally, you know what, when we think about intimate partners, this could have been a relationship that you had with your therapist. Perhaps you and your therapist sitting down and looking a little closely, looking more deeply into yourself. Perhaps also this could have been about the relationship that you had with your child, with your parents, having to explore those kinds of intimate relationships on a deeper level. Looking at communication, for example. How are you communicating? Maybe seeking to improve or transform when it came to communication so that you and whoever the other person was back then, so that you were on the same level. Having those hard conversations basically here, Scorpio. All right, then we fast forward to the end of December, or sorry, the end of 2021, coming into 2022. Venus retrograde in Capricorn. That retrograde occurred in your third house. All right, this one I feel a bit lighter compared to the other retrogrades that came before, right? Because I think that retrograde was more about study. It was more about practice. It was more about research. And it was also about you maybe taking more of a disciplined approach when it came to communication, when it came to your mindset, considering, okay, I want to commit to such and such a plan. And so these are the steps that I must take to get there. Now, with that being said, that retrograde could have also brought with it some, I would say, challenges, because Capricorn can be a challenging sign. Challenges related to your local environment, housing, property to an extent, right? So we think about if it was back then that you wanted to relocate, you wanted to find somewhere that was more secure, locally speaking, there could have been some issues. And it could have been that you had to address potential obstacles and blockages back then. Maybe vehicles, learning how to drive a certain vehicle was a big part of that. Fast forward to July, September of 2023. Venus retrograde was in Leo in your 10th house, Scorpio. All right. That was great for rebranding yourself, for certainly making a significant change on social media, thinking about how you appeared online back then, maybe coming out from behind the scenes a little bit, because I know with Scorpio, you do tend to shy away from the spotlight at times, or be very mindful of what you're sharing online or who with, etc. Privacy is very important to you. But that Venus retrograde could have really give you this push. It was like an oomph of, okay, it's time to go with it. It's time to be the entertainer, be the performer, be the leader, be creative, whatever. Enjoy that hobby, follow that passion, follow that interest. I'm going for it. And so that within itself was a time of great enthusiasm, self expression coming up, fun. Then we arrive at today, March until April of 2025. And we have Venus retrograde happening in Aries and Pisces. So your sixth and fifth houses. This is a retrograde that asks you to maybe consider what are the goals you have when it comes to your job, work. Perhaps you are in the process right now of moving a few things around, wanting to change your schedules, your routines, your habits. From this place of leadership, from this place of bravery, could also be a time of looking over any health concerns, being mindful of health concerns, being mindful of what you put into your body, thinking about diet, fitness, exercise, all those kinds of areas. And then stress, hey, you know what? Stress levels having to be explored so that you can manage your stress better. And then also parts of this involve creativity and being in the flow, coming from this place of spiritual insight and really sensing, feeling, feeling into, okay, my this is my hobby. This is what I enjoy doing. This is what genuinely makes me feel at ease, makes me feel at peace. So it's a good way then to see how you can be in the flow and how, by doing that, creatively speaking, that can really reflect outwardly. There's a glow that happens there. What I'm getting from this is being genuine, right? Being genuine about what you're truly passionate about, being honest with yourself about your passions and your interests. Now, throughout 2025 and coming into 2026, of course, Uranus is going to finish up in your seventh house. And so I think it's a good way for you to continue to really see, all right, well, how have my values changed when it comes to relationships, and who have I partnered up with? Who have I collaborated with? Who might I like to collaborate with again? Or what would I like to do differently moving forward when it comes to collaborations? Maybe I can see who I give too much time to, and I wouldn't like to do that again. And I want to be mindful of my own time, my own security, right? Seeing which kinds of relationships you've outgrown, and it's coming from a place of, this is what is good for me. This is what makes me feel secure within relationships. But equally, this is what doesn't make me feel secure within relationships. Thank you so much, Scorpio. And now moving on to Sagittarius. Okay, Sagittarius, let's talk about this Uranus and Taurus transit for you. So, Uranus has been transiting your sixth house since 2018. The sixth house being the house of health, diet, fitness, daily habits and routines, refining our skills, work, the services we provide, but also people of service, fixing, mending, medicine, food, pets, stress, productivity, all these kinds of areas we see. So, with Uranus traveling through this particular sector of your chart, we notice the unpredictable. We notice the inconsistencies and the instability, how unstable things have been. So, for example, this could be a situation, Sagittarius, where you have been up against certain health issues and you've had to go back and forth to your GP, or you've had to visit all types of health practitioners. Maybe this is about a certain fitness plan of yours, but you haven't been able to actually follow things through until completion. You haven't been able to stick to something, commit to something because, well, the everyday has been extra chaotic. It's been quite destabilizing, difficult to keep up. And so, in this regard, maybe Sagittarius, you have reached this point of, do you know what? It is what it is. I can't control it. There's only so much I can control throughout my day. And I'm not going to be hard on myself about this. I'm going to take it a day at a time. I'm going to practice gratitude, or maybe journal, or see what I am appreciative for, to count your blessings in a way. But then what I'm also thinking about here is how your work landscape, how your occupation has changed massively. For instance, before 2018, maybe you worked within a certain sector, within a certain field. And then all of a sudden, you decided to retire during this transit. Or you decided to leave that position, leave that role, that job, and instead embark on a new path. And so you were able to bring the skills that you developed and acquired from the previous position You were able to bring those skills and apply them to a new role. And this could also be a case of you having to continuously, or feeling like you're having to continuously clean, fix, mend, solve problems. It's as if people have been testing your stress levels, so to speak, because there's someone constantly needing you, someone calling on you, right? For help, for support. And you then also maybe having to distance yourself from certain people. So, certain people who do disrupt your routines far too much, and you have to sort of think to yourself, is this worth it for me? And then equally, this could also be about your very productivity levels, how your productivity levels have been up and down, up and down. There's a lack of consistency, I think. But you see, it's also about your ability to experiment with new strategies, new methods that work best for you. And it's those kinds of methods and strategies that you value that can actually help you remain consistent. Remember that Uranus isn't going to be in your sixth house forever, right? It's going to move. But then, hey, this could also be about bringing some kind of originality or invention, innovation to your work, to your daily routines and schedules. Perhaps passing on what you have learned, right? This is very you, Sagittarius. You pass on what you have learned with other people, to other people. You want to share. Right, now we have explored Uranus through the sixth. Let's talk about these Venus retrogrades. So at the end of 2018, Venus retrograde happened in Libra and Scorpio. So that retrograde occurred in your 11th and 12th houses. So at the end of 2018, that could have been a time of, oh my goodness, what is happening to me? What's happening to me? Why does it feel like my life is falling apart? Or having to honestly look within yourself and say, there's something not right here. There's an issue. Could be related to addiction, could have been related to escapism, could have been related to your health, especially your mental health. But then equally, we could look at this as you taking an honest review, right? And having an honest review tied to communities, groups, organizations you're a part of, causes you want to join, networking, and seeing then in which ways you were out of balance back then and how you wanted to restore some balance within those areas. By May, June of 2020, Venus retrograde occurred in your seventh house. All right, that retrograde was quite reflective because it was through the other that you were able to look within yourself and maybe identify with, okay, are there communication issues? How can we maybe try and be diplomatic about this or reasonable about this? Can we find the balance? Can we find the connection, how we relate, but also how do we differ? Clashes in opinion could have really came up. But you see, I think equally that was a massive learning experience for you. Learning from your partners, learning from clients, learning from other people. Fast forward to December. So December 2021 coming into 2022, Venus retrograde in Capricorn occurred. So that happened in your second house. That retrograde perhaps invited an honest, practical review, an honest, sensible review tied to your belongings, your resources, your spending habits. So if it was back then that you had certain long-term goals in mind of, right, okay, I want to move, or this is the job I want to get into, or this is the kind of money that I want to make from my skills. This is how I wish to improve professionally, right? So whatever it was, It was about showing that commitment, showing integrity, recognizing that you have to start from somewhere, revisiting the very foundation, the very structure of your materials, your finances. Fast forward to July until September of 2023, Venus retrograde occurred in Leo. So that happened in your ninth house. So that retrograde was perhaps about reconsidering where you were, could be philosophically speaking, religiously speaking, revisiting your higher education. So for instance, it could be for example that you decided to take on a previous educational program. So something that you once were doing, but then you stopped doing it for a while and then you got back onto it. Or it could be a case of you reconsidering what really you love, right? What do you enjoy, genuinely enjoy learning about? What kinds of destinations do you enjoy traveling to? Who do you enjoy traveling with? Your values came into the equation there. The kinds of experiences you want to have, the kinds of experiences and opportunities you value. All right, so we arrive at today, and we have the Venus retrograde occurring throughout March and April of 2025 in Aries and Pisces. So happening in your fifth and fourth houses. All right, so this particular retrograde is offering you an opportunity to look over what your hobbies, what your interests, what your passions are. Maybe making more time for yourself, making more time for your personal goals, your personal aims, seeing in which ways you are very involved with certain family members, perhaps looking at and addressing any unhealthy ways of merging heavily with certain family members. But equally, we can look at this as how you have changed spiritually speaking when it comes to the very relationship you have with family, how you've grown emotionally, how you support family, how you show up for those that you love. But then I do think that a part of this is about some sort of ending or making peace, right? Making peace with a living situation, a family matter. But then, of course, we want to think about how Uranus is going to finish up in your sixth house. So throughout the rest of 2025, towards April of 2026, right? Because Uranus will officially leave Taurus and enter Gemini by the end of April of 2026. Well, maybe it's about you still continuing to go over, okay, you know what? This is what I've learned about my health. This is what I've learned about my own limitations. And that maybe I'm not as invincible as I thought I was. And in hindsight, I didn't think that I would get to this point in my life, health wise, work wise. Could even be that certain coworker relationships have developed in a different way. And you're feeling quite grateful for those relationships. Or this could even be about your pets. Maybe you thought prior 2018 that you would never have a pet. Oh, no, don't want a dog. No, we're not getting a dog. We're not getting a cat. Maybe that is actually what happens, right? So, indeed, it's just a good time to reflect and to consider how much your life has changed for the better, hopefully for the better. But heck, you know what? Still learning from the situations that have not been the best too. Yeah, seeing how matters have changed when it comes to your very everyday. So when you look out around you, how is it that you now value routine? Think about your morning routines, your evening routines. How is it that you show up when it comes to certain tasks that need to be done, responsibilities that fall on you? Maybe a part of this transit has been about you realizing a thing or two about how much you're taking on and how much actually you don't need to take on, how much is not your responsibility, it's not yours to carry. Because I do partly think about your stress levels being quite high, a bit of a concern. And so part of this could be about freedom, wanting greater freedom, not having to take on as much as you think you do. Thank you so much, Sagittarius. And now moving on to Capricorn. All right, so Capricorn, Uranus has been traveling through your fifth house since 2018. So we think about this fifth house of games, entertainment, bets, gambling, fun, play, recreation, time off, right? Amusements, hobbies, creativity, your interests, your passions, children, sports, sexual expression as well. Yes, your romantic relationships too. So, with that being said, Capricorn, with Uranus traveling through this fifth house, I mean, things have been really quite unpredictable. Maybe prior 2018, you were in a particular committed relationship with someone for a long time. And now, in hindsight, you're really glad that it didn't work out. Maybe because you found someone else. Or it's that you thought to yourself that you would be single for a long time. And then again, Uranus comes into your fifth house. And then since 2018, you got into a significant relationship, a significant partnership where you feel connected. You feel like you're on the same page about what you want for the future. But hey, this could also manifest as you intentionally or unintentionally deciding to be single. Maybe because of some outside circumstances, right? Those things have happened. And so you're in a situation now where you think, when am I ever going to find love again? What is going to happen for me when it comes to romantic relationships? You can even be very comfortable with that fact, actually. You can be very secure within yourself and think to yourself, I want to be single. I want to be. Plus, we want to combine this a little bit with children. So, for instance, for some of you Capricorns, it could be a case of, yep, it's final. I'm never having children. I don't want to have children. Or it could be a case of the unexpected happening with relation to children. So, you not really knowing what way it's going to go. There's just that unpredictability. And so, maybe in this regard, it has been important not to become overly stuck or attached or fixed on things. And equally, we could look at this as innovation tied to that of your hobbies, your creativity, maybe wanting to practice your skills when it comes to your creativity, wanting to improve, but unexpectedly so, right? For instance, it could be that you discovered a new hobby during this transit, something that just sort of fell on your lap, and you think to yourself in hindsight, well, I never thought that I would get into that, whatever that may be for you. And we could also, of course, look at this as you experimenting, maybe experimenting with interesting ways of making bets or gambling, possibly. Or we could look at this as you seeking greater freedom and inspiration from that of fun and play, maybe connecting with your inner child is a big focus here. Could also be about some sort of experimentation to do with sports, right? So, experimenting with different methods and strategies. And then I also think that time off, that's a bit disruptive for you. Maybe a part of Well, some of you are thinking to yourself, time off, what's that? I don't get that, right? But then others of you, maybe you're on a bit of a mission because you think to yourself, I want more time off. I want greater freedom. I don't want to have to work as much. So there is that, I guess, that focus in place to want to set things up in such a way where you're not continuously working. And so maybe it's more about creativity, right? So maybe turning some sort of creative project into a source of income for yourself. And then that remains quite consistent. But then again, because Uranus has been there, we have noticed the disruptions and the chaos and the moments of, oh my goodness, I just want to tear my hair out. I want to pull it out. Okay, now we have explored Uranus through the fifth. Let's think about Venus and the Venus retrogrades. Let's take you back to the end of 2018. Venus retrograde happened in your 10th and 11th houses. Okay, those retrogrades could have indicated a time of you reviewing appearance, you reviewing how you showed up within maybe your profession, your career, in front of an audience, thinking about the public, so your social media presence, rebranding yourself in this way, reviewing the pros and the cons, weighing out your options, seeing which kinds of people you really connect with. Who are those like-minded individuals? Who do you trust within the group? Who can you rely on? Who can you depend on within the group? Maybe thinking about more of a desire to connect on an intimate level with certain group members back then. Then, May until June of 2020, Venus retrograde happened in Gemini. So that occurred in your sixth house. Well, that was certainly an opportunity, Capricorn, for you to mix things up, switch things up, change scenery, change the vibe, right? To maybe address a different way or multiple different ways, different angles of seeing things when it came to your routines and your habits for every day. Fast forward to December 2021, coming into 2022, Venus retrograde happens in your sign. Yes, in your sign, Capricorn. So that was certainly a good time of, okay, I want to reflect upon my aims, what I want, your path, your trajectory. Honestly, looking at and addressing your approach, the way you do things, the way you see things. New beginnings tied to creativity, new beginnings tied to finances, earning money from your creativity. We go back to that. But then, this could have also been about your very appearance, your body. Maybe certain health changes happened back then, physical condition changes happened, your sense of self was challenged. But that maybe was a good way to look within yourself and to identify with your inner security. Fast forward to July until September of 2023. Venus retrograde was in Leo. So that Venus retrograde happened in your eighth house, right? That one, a lot more intense, a lot more deep. Exploring your depths, exploring the parts of you that you repress, deny. We think of this in terms of fun. We think of this in terms of childlikeness, enjoyment. What is it that you enjoy? And I think this is often a part of a challenge that you experience. And a part of it is that you can at times be so focused on the results, so focused on the money side of things, the material side of things, the security side of things, which isn't, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. I think this is great and it's partly what makes you you, right? But it's still a question of where is the Where is the genuine love, the genuine passion and interest? Because I think, for example, when we make our hobby a form of income, a part of that can involve losing the spark. But I also think that Venus retrograde back then, so 2023 time, that was quite enlightening because it helped shed light on those kinds of questions. So a lot of discovery could have happened. And so that maybe was a time of transformation, a revival, if you will. You may be deciding, yeah, you know what? I am going to start this creative project because I want to do it. It's not about the money, it's not about the success from it. I just want to do it. Okay, March, April 2025. So we arrive at today, and Venus retrograde is happening in your fourth and your third houses. All right, so this retrograde, I think it's given you an opportunity to go within to a large extent and to maybe connect with your emotional world, right? To maybe look at the very core, right? Your core self, and how that core self is about individuality, independence, being a leader, being a trailblazer, a pioneer. So maybe looking to those very areas within yourself, those qualities. But then I also think it's an opportunity for you to perhaps go over, okay, well, what about the things that I'm advertising? How am I showing up on social media? What is my message? The choice of my words. How do things appear design wise, aesthetically, right? Also, a good way for you to maybe re educate yourself, to maybe look over some extra information, see what you've missed, what you've overlooked. And well, it could also be a case of you revisiting older conversations, having to go back over information from the past, maybe regarding siblings, regarding classmates, childhood friends, and so on. So let's then consider how Uranus will continue through your fifth house until about April of 2026. Yes, Uranus will enter your sixth for a short window of time, which will be in a separate video. But maybe just use the rest of Uranus being in your fifth house as an opportunity to just consider how much you have changed creatively speaking, how your creative process has changed, or how the relationship you have with your children has changed. I mean, that's another possibility there, right? With children, like I was saying, it could be a case of you deciding not to have children or suddenly having children, maybe deciding to adopt a child, for instance. But whatever the case, yes, to review where you are when it comes to your children and where you are when it comes to the relationship that you have with your lover, with your romantic partner. And heck, this could also be a case of self-love, right? Loving the self and accepting yourself. Individuality is a big focus here in this way. How secure your individuality is, and how that can even reflect outwardly, how that can show up when it comes to your spending, your earnings, your money. Thank you so much, Capricorn. And now we are going to move on to Aquarius. So, Aquarius, Uranus has been traveling through your fourth house since 2018. So, with the fourth house, we're thinking about family, ancestors, the past, conditioning. We think here about emotional habits, emotional attachments, the home, land, your garden, my goodness, parenting, parents. So, with Uranus traveling through this fourth house area, Aquarius, it does appear as if there have been many upheavals a lot of chaos, many disruptions, the unpredictable, things being very unstable and unsettling when it comes to home. Feeling a bit like, oh my goodness, when am I just going to get a break? It just feels like one drama after another, having to look after other people, having to be there to support other people, or you having to come to terms with clear, very, very clear ways of putting yourself first and choosing, and I mean actively choosing, a calmer life for yourself, a simpler life for yourself, instead of getting swept up in all of the drama and the chaos of it all. Of course, this is not so black and white because I mean, it could be a case of some of you Aquarians out there having to be there to support family. Could be your children, for instance. I'm thinking about certain Aquarians out there who have a child and maybe they've been quite sick. Maybe they've been up and down emotionally, or you've been having to support your family because you're the only person who is there to support your family, providing for your family in this regard. And another possibility here is that before 2018, maybe many of you Aquarians out there, you thought to yourself, well, this is the kind of home that I want to live in. This is the area that I want to live in. This is the type of family that I wish to have in the future. But actually, in hindsight, and we're really thinking about currently, that's not the case. And things look very different. But perhaps at the same time, a part of that is a bit of a blessing, right? Especially if it is, for instance, that before 2018, you thought, no, I don't want any of those things actually. But then you are in a situation where you're feeling pretty grateful that those kinds of things have manifested for you. Um, let's also then think about, with Uranus here, your emotional attachments changing. So people that you were once emotionally attached to, it's not the case now. Perhaps this has also been about healthy levels of detachment and separation from particular family members. That's what I was also trying to get at a moment ago. And then equally, this could be about some healthy self exploration tied to the past, having to go back to those moments, having to explore those memories. A bit triggering, honestly, on that note, but also by doing so, very enlightening. Light bulb moments. Maybe you're even asked to be quite inventive, creative about the home, changing your environment, changing things up within your house, within your property. But let's move on and let's think about Venus. So, Venus has, of course, been retrograde. So, it has been making its retrogrades throughout certain signs since 2018. We have the Venus retrograde in Libra and Scorpio at the end of 2018, occurring in your ninth and 10th houses. So that particular retrograde could have invited some kind of drastic change to do with travel, to do with your career. Maybe a type of transformation happened, a kind of renewal happened related to your career path, your professional life, accomplishments, achievements back then. Your worldviews, your beliefs, your philosophical views, especially there, could have changed massively back then. Or you took a closer look at them and you really had to think, do I identify with this? Do I truly identify with this message? Weighing out your options. Then, May, June of 2020, Venus retrograde happened in Gemini. So that actually occurred in your fifth house. Okay, so that was a very creative retrograde. That was a good opportunity for you to switch things up creatively and to also revisit certain conversations with lovers, with romantic partners. Could have been especially conversations tied to children or tied to sexual expression. Then we fast forward to the end of 2021, coming into 2022, Venus retrograde in Capricorn. So that retrograde happened in your 12th. Well, that one was particularly, I would say, confronting, challenging, something that maybe you kept private. So, what could that have been? That could have been you looking within yourself and facing this inner authoritarian voice, or you facing your own blockages, your own limitations, how you might have gotten in your own way, especially back then. Maybe revisiting the relationship that you had with your father back then. Or maybe this could have been some kind of loss tied to the father, your father. Or this could have been some kind of self worth issue that was very challenging for you back then. Then, fast forward to July, September of 2023, Venus retrograde happened in the sign opposite you in Leo, Aquarius. All right, well, that was a retrograde that I suppose, in a way, it acted as a mirror, a self love mirror, an appreciation mirror, an ego, perhaps an ego related mirror too. Seeing in which ways you can come from a place of ego, which isn't a bad thing, by the way, but also seeing in which ways perhaps you were not fully identifying with play and fun and joy and this childlike innocence. It's like other people back then were acting as mirrors to help you identify with the part of your inner child, that part of you that maybe was often overlooked growing up, right? So, reconnecting with the things that you love to do during your younger years. Then we fast forward to March, April time, and we arrive at today, right? March, April time, 2025. Venus retrograde is currently in Pisces, but of course, yes, the Venus retrograde has been happening in Pisces and Aries. So activating your second and third houses. So the Venus retrograde for you is perhaps asking you to consider, all right, what is it media wise that you want to say? What are the choice of words you're using? What is your message? What are you advertising to others? How do you wish to advertise and market yourself, perhaps? Equally, this could also be about the relationship you have with money, energetically speaking, spiritually speaking. Maybe disentangling yourself from a certain financial situation and just taking that time to go within and to assess, intuitively speaking, how aligned am I when it comes to my finances? You might actually be called to make peace with a particular financial situation or be asked to let go, even though you may not want to. It's still about being able to walk away or choose a different path that is more aligned with you. And again, I'm talking about this more so from a spiritual level, right? Interesting. Though, what I will say here, Aquarius, is just remember that Uranus is going to continue through your fourth house throughout a good part of 2025 and then coming into 2026. So maybe just take some time throughout the rest of 2025, coming into 2026, as an opportunity to think about, right? To think about how matters have changed for you, living situation wise, family wise. I mean, when I reflect on this just for a moment, and my son is in Aquarius, my family situation has changed massively. I did not think that certain people, certain family members would not be here anymore. I wouldn't have thought that. And then also just when it comes to my own inner security and how much more secure and safe I feel within my body, within myself, that's been pretty massive for me. And I'm very appreciative. I'm very thankful. Indeed, reflect, consider how you have changed as a person amongst family members, maybe even seeing the ways in which you don't identify from this family perspective too. Um, and even to consider how it is that your very surroundings, right? So the very home or house that you live in, how has that changed? Maybe you've changed multiple times, right? You've had to relocate multiple times since 2018. And perhaps you're coming to this point where you don't want to have to do that as much, or it's that you're quite comfortable with that, you're accepting of that, or it's that there is some kind of big leap or big move that you want to make eventually. So we consider, for example, you moving abroad or making a significant change when it comes to your home. Thank you so much, Aquarius. Lastly, then, we move on to Pisces. So, Pisces, let's talk about you. Uranus has been transiting your third house since 2018. Your third house. What is the third house all about? So, we think about advertising, media, your local community, your local areas, places that are nearby, right? Your daily commute, trade, vehicles, learning, speech, communication, books, reading, social media there, um, social media, yes, intellect, neighbors, siblings, writing, school, many things. So with Uranus traveling through this house for you since 2018, we could look at this as the unpredictable occurring related to your local environment. Let's go with that to begin with. So, for example, perhaps the very neighborhood you live in, it has changed massively. Yes, this could be you literally moving from one neighborhood to another, but this could also show up as the very neighbors within your neighborhood changing massively. Maybe you've been introduced to certain neighbors over these years and you've become quite close, quite familiar. There's been a bond there. Or it's that the very relationship you have with your siblings has changed quite substantially. Whether this be you growing apart, separating, detaching, or this be you actually becoming closer because you think, well, I didn't realize that we had so much in common, but actually we do. We do have a lot in common, like minds, right? Yes, sibling relationships changing. Plus, could also be a case of your vehicles changing quite a bit. So, for instance, you either learning how to drive or deciding that you don't want to drive anymore, or you learning a new way of um, getting around transport wise, vehicle wise. I mean, what I'm imagining here is learning how to ride a motorcycle or learning how to operate lorries or bigger vehicles, right? Or buses, for instance. And equally with this transit, perhaps we've noticed social media shifts suddenly. So the unpredictable happening on social media. For instance, this could manifest as you deciding to completely close down all forms of social media over recent years, or this could manifest as you deciding to finally start that social media account and feeling a little bit on edge about it, a bit unsure about it, But in hindsight, you're glad that you did it because maybe you've been able to connect with like minds and with people from all over the world, right? And this has also been about your very writing and speech and learning changing massively. I think about certain programs you've joined or courses, ways that you've wanted to educate yourself, and doing so in a way where you feel safe, secure, you feel that desire to want to do so. And to think here, Pisces, that with having Taurus in the third house, you prefer to learn in practical ways. So you're more likely going to join a particular course or program if it's being taught to you practically and slowly. So you taking your time to learn about whatever that subject or topic or area, whatever that is. And then I also partly finding your skills during this transit, again, unexpectedly speaking. So, for instance, you deciding out of the blue, I really want to learn how to play guitar, or I really want to learn how to sing, I really want to learn how to dance or paint or write, whatever that is, and just going with it and following your intuition and doing it in community. Maybe that's been a big focus for you. It's the importance of doing it within community, feeling supported by your community. And then also, I equally think that how you advertise could be your services, right? It could be some program of yours that you've created. How you go about advertising those things has changed quite drastically. And what I'm getting from this is you reinventing yourself communication wise. So the choice of your words, your messages, etc., they have changed quite a bit over these years. All right. So what we want to do now is we want to explore the Venus retrograde. So let's consider the journey of Venus retrograde since Uranus entered Taurus. There was the Venus retrograde at the end of 2018 in Libra and Scorpio. So that retrograde happened in your 8th and ninth houses. That that particular retrograde could have invited, hey, maybe some interesting insights about shared resources, maybe deciding to consider your life with another person, how you share materially, financially, right? We think about that emotional bond, that emotional connection with another person, trust and intimacy, possibly wanting to have a child together. But we could also look at this through a lens of you going on a bit of a spiritual journey and maybe deciding to learn more about yourself and looking deep within yourself, seeing in which ways you might get in your own way, or addressing your pain, addressing anything that's quite buried and deep and painful there, essentially, right? And then also, maybe that was a time to honestly look over what your bigger message is. Because I think for you, Pisces, it needs to come from, okay, sure, it needs to come from the heart, but it needs to come from this deeper place, a deeper perspective, something that's more profound. And that's where the beauty arises. That's where the meat the meat of whatever subject or topic it is, that's where it comes from. It's whenever you can look within yourself, identify with a part of the self. Okay, and then of course you communicate that with other people, and that within itself can help transform the lives of others, perhaps unintentionally so. So, May, June 2020, Venus retrograde happened in Gemini. So, that occurred in your fourth house, Pisces. So, therefore, that retrograde might have been a little bit chaotic, honestly. It could have been a bit scattered and up and down. It could have been highly adaptable, highly flexible, having to adjust to everybody else's opinions and their ideas, and you may be feeling a little bit all over the place because of this person and that person, okay, this family member and their siblings getting involved, and the aunties and the uncles, and everyone's coming in with their views about what we need to do and what we need to change, etc. Um, but hopefully you were able to discover a few answers along the way. And then fast forward to December. So we think about the end of 2021 coming into 2022. Venus retrograde happened in your 11th house. Well, that retrograde could have been rather insightful regarding community, regarding friendships, and people that you surrounded yourself with back then. So we're thinking about quality over quantity here. We're thinking about the kinds of people that you could visualize being around more long term. People who are consistent, mature, somewhat responsible individuals, learning a thing or two about responsibility via your friendships, via team members, team players, communities. Could it have been a situation where you decided to go on your own path, to take a different path, a different approach related to community and maybe a company or an organization that you were a part of back then? Or it's that you went for it, you really went for a particular, uh, it could have been a club, right? Like a club scenario, a club situation that you decided to start, all as a way to improve. Okay, so July until September of 2023, Venus retrograde happened in Leo. So that occurred in your sixth house, Pisces. So that particular retrograde could have invited more of a creative view or outlook related to your daily practices. Maybe even you wanted to be seen or recognized in some way, shape, or form when it came to work. And perhaps also you had to stop for a minute and had to think, is this work? Is this job bringing me happiness? Do I feel genuinely appreciated here? Do I feel valued here? Can I maybe take some time to integrate some creativity, right? So to make time, yeah, to make time for creativity, to even make sure that you were having some time off, well needed time off. So those themes could have been looked over and revisited. But then we arrive at today, March, April time of 2025. Here we see Venus retrograde is happening in your sign partly, but also in Aries, in the second house. So this is a retrograde where, yes, it's about you taking a look at your money situation, your earnings, your assets, your investments, your skills, your talents, to think about how you wish to maybe move forward when it comes to those areas, how you want to, could be first, right? Being first or being a champion, being a bit of a trailblazer within those areas. But more importantly, I think this is a process of letting go, making peace, moving on, and doing so from this place of health, your physical condition. Because it could be here, for example, that, Pisces, you're reaching a bit of a point that says, I need to focus on my own spiritual path. I can't do the same things I once did. I can't be around the same people I once was around. And so there does seem to be a significant shift, a significant change in direction. And that shift in direction is tied to your health, your body, your appearance. Though, whenever we consider how Uranus is going to finish up in your third house, so yes, Uranus will dip its toe into your fourth house for a period of time throughout 2025, but essentially, Uranus is still finishing up in your third house throughout 2025 until April of 2026. So, coming towards the end here, maybe it's a good opportunity, Pisces, for you to think about, well, how have my views changed? My opinions? How has my consciousness maybe evolved? And which kinds of people within my local community, within my close circle, who am I grateful to? Who do I feel secure around? And well, which subjects and topics am I glad to have started learning about or diving deeper into? Because it's thanks to educating myself in within these areas that I've been able to meet X, Y, and Z, right? Thank you so much, Pisces. And this has been then, folks, your Uranus in Taurus story. And I do want to say thank you so much for listening. Thank you for tuning in today. If you would like to book a reading with me, you can visit my website, hannahselsewhere.com. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more if you haven't already. Of course, like the video if you did like it today. And if you did enjoy today's video, you can always buy me a coffee. And on that note, I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.